1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. Friday show live. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast live. Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. It's the Friday show. It's the Ipswich preview show. We are live and I am your host, Ian Croll. Joining me in the Royal Blue studio today to talk all things Everton, we've got Joe Thomas. How are things, Joe? All good?
Yeah, good, cheers.
David Moyes' pre-match press conference this afternoon off to Finch Farm.
Yeah, 1:30 start, so I'll head up there shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully get some updates from Moyes and some injury news.
Yep.
Also got Gav Buckland. Gav, how are we? All good?
Fine, mate. Yeah.
Complaining about your knee as you came in the office.
Not my knee, my thigh.
Oh, your thigh. Sorry.
Yeah, I've not played since, as you know, I've not played foot since the end of last August. So I've got something wrong with my thigh, which I think is called tectronic something bursitis, which is as painful as it sounds.
That's a mouthful to get
say.
through,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you're on rehab, aren't you?
Rehab, yeah. So you saw me when I was coming back from the bath yesterday, but it's going to be a while before I get back on the grass. To be fair, I've been out for 8 months, so at my age, that's not good.
A few more months than Dominic Calvert-Lewin, that.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I don't think anybody wants me though. If I was to move, to be honest with you,
Wrexham, maybe. Wrexham.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, well, today's agenda, plenty to get through. We are obviously going to talk about Ipswich. We'll do team selection. We'll do score predictions. And continuing on from Wednesday's show, it was a bit of a feisty debate. We are going to carry on the discussion on Dominic Calvert-Lewin's Everton future. I know Joe and a couple of other lads did a bit of a summary piece, I guess, just talking about whether you'd keep Calvert-Lewin or, I guess, offer him a new contract on better terms. So we will get into that. Also on the agenda, Everton were mentioned in Parliament this past week. So we're going to explain why, and we're going to discuss the ramifications of what was said and what that could mean for football in general. Plenty of other things on the show as well. As always, give this video a thumbs up, drop us a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. You wanted me to explain, Gav, didn't you, why I always say that little
Yeah. For us technophobes, why is it important?
Well, obviously, if you interact, then YouTube would like that better, and hopefully
so it pops up on algorithms and stuff. And
save our video and podcast to a lot more people.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's why I should do it then. I'll make sure I like it in future myself when I get home.
You haven't been liking it previously?
No.
Joe's always liking it.
I'll have lots of stuff doing it, won't I?
Okay, let's get to it then. Joe...
Sorry, before we go, where are we on the podcast league table at the moment? Have you checked?
No, I'm going to wait till the end of the season.
And
see where we are.
Yeah.
See where we are on that one. Penultimate game even, at Goodison Park on Saturday. Excited? I am.
Yeah, really looking forward to it, actually. Yeah. I kind of got a sneaky feeling that almost this might be more emotional than Southampton. Like, I almost feel like with Southampton, because it's going to be the last game, so you expect it, don't you? And there's almost a pressure on it.
Yeah.
I kind of... Saturday isn't going to be the last time that you go to a game and it's normal, because it's anything but normal right now. But I just think I feel like the pressure's off. Ipswich, like Southampton, would obviously hope to beat. The sun should be shining. 1878's their last display. They've been working on it for 2 days already. We'll be back down there again today and then before the game tomorrow. So having seen some of what they're doing, it really does look like it's going to be spectacular. So I don't know. Like, I think almost everybody had their game head on Southampton, because they'll be putting pressure on themselves to kind of make the most of it. Tomorrow's probably the last one you can go into with a little bit of naivety and just kind of maybe get swept away by the day, rather than thinking of every time you do something, this is the last time I go through this turnstile, this is the last time I go up these stairs, this is the last time I go on the seat. You won't have that tomorrow. So I almost think it might be a little bit easier to enjoy. But I kind of am like tomorrow. Just that's it. I want to try and get to the ground as early as I can and just try and suck it all in.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of people, well, Danny Church has said, morning lads, can't believe tomorrow will be my last ever 3 p.m. kickoff at Goodison. I guess it could be a lot of people's last game tomorrow going to Goodison Park as well, because people might not have tickets for the Southampton, or they might just, I know there's a lot of people who were worried that they might be away abroad because they booked holidays. So
absolutely.
We're talking about it's enjoyable, but tomorrow's going to be emotional for a couple of people as well.
We're saying, Joe, get ambushed emotionally tomorrow where you're not expected to be emotional, but you are. I get that. It's the final 3 p.m. So it's the final.
Traditional.
The final normal game of Goodison, I suppose you would call it. And you are right. I spoke to a former employer of this parish before the last home game, and it was their last game at Goodison. And we were basically saying it's actually, if your last game's not the final game, if you know what I mean, it's actually, in some respects, that's a good place to be, because it's very personal to you.
Yeah.
There's people around here who are not emotional because they might be coming back for the next few games and stuff like that. But for me, this is my last game here where nobody else is emotional about it.
Yeah.
Like they will be on the final game. And in some respects, that's quite a good way to go out, I think, where your last game isn't the final game at Goodison. It makes the whole thing zero in on you, doesn't it? A little bit more, make it more personal to you. And I think that could be the case tomorrow for a lot of people, as you say. And with it being 3 p.m, and Joe said hopefully the weather's nice and it's bank holiday weekend, it might be an emotional experience in itself. And I'd not thought of it that way before we came in, but I certainly get that. I get the 3 p.m. bit. You know, our first 3 p.m. kickoff was at Goodison in 1892 against Accrington. So you've got that in the same way like night games are significant. You know, we said, the final night game at Goodison, blah, blah. The final 3 p.m. Saturday game at Goodison is also significant because that is the way football operated for, a century. And so it's a hugely significant game on that basis, just that we could get a hugely significant result. I get that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. I think it's important that we do get a win. Again, obviously, there's nothing majorly riding on it, but we certainly don't want to be finishing 17th, just above the relegation zone. And we know there's, position-wise, the points are extremely close. So we don't want to be on the record. We don't want to be just above the relegation zone. We will come on to further discussion on the Ipswich game later in the show. But let's start getting through the topics. Everton have confirmed plans and prices for supporters to purchase Goodison Park seats. Each seat will come in a specially designed personalised presentation box. The window for purchasing starts on Friday, May the 9th at 10 a.m. and seats are priced at £90 plus £10 posting and packaging. What do you make of that, Joe?
I always thought they would make the seats available for sale. Something I've been asking about all season. That's what I've been asked about all season as well. I knew for quite some time one of the big difficulties they've got is the way in which a lot of the seats are fixed in. Obviously, the older ones, the wooden ones, a lot of them are fixed in rows, so it's not as straightforward as just removing a seat or part of a seat. So, so they spent a lot of time trying to work out the best way in which they can kind of approach that and try and make it fair and things. So, when it came out, I was pleased to see it because I think it'd be nice for people to be able to kind of own that slice of history. I actually kind of think as well that it's probably a good reminder or a good acknowledgement that whatever happens to Goodison, it's not going to be the same, because I think that there's a lot of talk about whether or not Goodison might end up being used for the women's team going forward, and they're carrying out a feasibility study to see if that might be possible, and trying to work out what that would look like Goodison in the future. Like you'd almost feel like there would be almost a certain sense of hollowness to the last game at Goodison if you go. And then in 18 months' time, for instance, it opens up to it and it's the same Goodison. Now, that was never going to be the case. But I think this is probably the clearest example to people that things are going to change because, if it ends up being a women's arena, they're going to have to kind of completely, rejig it. They're leaving Goodison for a reason. And perhaps the biggest piece of evidence now that we know that it's going to change is the fact that probably 30,000 seats are going to be removed and sold off. And look, like, let's be perfectly honest, I don't know insider information on this, but there's going to be some seats left over that aren't available to hospitality members and season ticket holders. Well, if you're selling a big chunk of them, you'd imagine that the others are probably going to end up available in some way, shape or form, aren't they? So it's going to be interesting. Would you going to buy yours?
I'm undecided. I mean, I think the price, is probably standard. I've got no issues with the price. It is what it is. I just don't know. I know it comes in a personalised box, but Kaylee, my wife, thinks I'm a hoarder, and if I just end up bringing something back in the house along these lines, she'll just be like, "What are you doing?" Although if you can get your own personal seat, obviously it's personal and special to you. But again, I'm undecided, so I've still got I guess a couple of days to think about it. Really.
Yeah, I've asked about the press seats because it's been sitting on mine for years now.
Those padded ones.
Nothing padded about them. No, the old wooden. And like I think that. I like if I could, I probably would. But then I don't. Again, same with you. Like I've already got so much memorabilia from covering Everton over the last few years. I don't know. I always had these grand ideas of maybe there'll be a shed or a cupboard or a room or a wall or something with it all on. Never get around to doing it, and you end up just with everything. So, spent enough money on the bricks in the new Everton way. So, trying to justify another £100 is tough. But if I can buy one, I know I'll end up doing it. So.
Fair enough. I mean, I've heard a rumour, Gav, like, again, this is no inside information whatsoever, just someone messaged me the other day to say that he's heard that the club are going to let the women's team take over Goodison Park. Again, there's no official decision on that, and you wouldn't expect anything to be until after the final game of the season, because I think that could ruin it, especially if Goodison Park's going to stay. But first off, what do you make of the seats, and would you keep Goodison Park for the women's team?
On when we heard, was it Monday, Joe was talking about the benefits of being in the press box in terms of food. You certainly don't get the benefits of good seating in the press box, especially if you're my height. I think it was built when the average person, it was built in 1970, wasn't it? The average person must have been about 5'4". To be honest with you, it's very cramped. It's certainly not as. I mean, I've sat in the stands a couple of games this season. It's certainly not as good as sitting in the stands. So yeah, just push that room and that. It's leather back seat in the press box. It certainly isn't.
I have been in there and it's not.
It isn't it? Yeah. In terms of the women's stadium, may benefit us financially, possibly. See how that one pans out. Because there's obviously opportunities there. But it's right to say, it's a bit of a triggers new broom, this, and only fools and horses. It's still the same stadium. Well, no, it isn't, is it? It's because it's going to be completely different. So I think there may be financial benefits for the club, shall we say, of doing that, of playing the women's team there.
And I think the women's game is growing as well.
Yeah, and because they was going to have 7,000 seats stadium or something like that in the women's game. Yeah, so makes sense. And we'll see, but it certainly won't be Goodison Park as we know it. It'll just be the site, won't it, really?
Yeah, it wouldn't ruin any sentimental value for you.
No, it'll just be the footprint, won't it? I mean, it's got to be something, hasn't it, really?
I think it'd be nice if it stays.
I originally thought, I'm not so sure about that. But when you see, as I say, what Joe was saying about the plans for actually taking all the infrastructure out and stuff like that, but what remains there is just the site, isn't it? So I wouldn't have a problem with that.
You'd have a good statement of intent, I think, for the women's team as well.
Absolutely.
Like, we know that the Freakins are really, really keen to to back the women's side. They strengthened in January, brought 6 new players in. That's had an impact on the team already. We've seen what they did at Roma, where Roma's women's side won their first Serie A 2 years ago last year, won a domestic double. So, there's a lot of importance there. I was up at Finch Farm earlier this week. It's the Merseyside derby this weekend. I was speaking to Hayley Ladd, one of the summer signings, and she was talking about how the representatives of the Freakins are coming, giving a presentation, and obviously a statement of intent with the signings, show of respect, which isn't a given, unfortunately, in the women's game. I mean, you've only got to look at what's gone on at Wolves, where they've just missed out on promotion to the top tier, but it turns out that the club never applied for the license to go up a league, even if they'd have earned it on the pitch. And I think it's a good sign that the Freakins are going to take that side of the club seriously, because it's important that they do. Yeah,
that was one of the benefits, wasn't it, for the women's part of the club, wasn't it? Was the fact that the American owners coming in, because they take women's football, I won't say seriously is the right word. It's got high prominence, hasn't it, in America? The women's game. You're going to see like how the Americans women's team is bigger than the Americans men's team. It's given it a far higher profile there, and I think that's reflected in the Freakins since they've come. And that's good news, I think, for
absolutely.
The club and for the women's team as well. That actually got owners who are totally invested in women's football. Just because one of the reasons being that they're American, and they look at the women's game completely different than what they do over here.
I think that's it. I think the more you look at it, it's a good idea. It's long-term planning.
Yeah.
Look how far the women's game has come over the last 20, 30 years, even more so probably how quick it's developed in the last 5 to 10. You don't know where the women's game could be in the next 10 to 15, 20 years. And it's also another venue that you could hold events, concerts. You don't know what could happen in the future.
Yeah,
it's a really good piece of long-term planning for me if the decision is made.
It kind of retains Everton control over so much of the kind of furniture around there as well, because so much of that's really, really important, isn't it, and poignant. And you obviously you got the statues, you got the gates, and you got other features in that as well, which obviously there's discussions around what would happen to them. But the Goodison legacy project meant that Everton were always going to stay there in some kind of format if they could. But what it does mean is you're not going to end up with a building site that no longer has any connection to Everton other than the footprint. But you end up with these Everton artifacts around it, and who maintains them and who protects them and things like that starts to become an issue.
Yeah. I think it could be a shrewd move, as I say, financially for the club. Yeah, and you're right, Joe.
Gav with his PSR hats on.
Oh, yeah,
He's so
absolutely.
cynical about these rules, Gav.
Yeah, I know. But
where does it come from?
it comes from looking at
Comes from everything that we've been through for the last 2
absolutely,
years.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably talk about this later on. Yeah, you don't want to see like the Holy Trinity statue, accidentally run over by a tractor, do you, or something like that?
It's a random one. Isn't it?
I don't know where that come from.
No, what I'm saying is that you could just have could just be a building site where you've got the Holy Trinity sat and there's the load of building work that never gets done next to it. Does it really? It just visibly it doesn't look great, does it?
Hopefully they put fences around it. That'll be my
I tell you,
solution.
my experience that hasn't stopped bad stuff happening.
You can't trap the Holy Trinity.
No, protect it.
Don't put them behind a
protect, not
fence.
trap.
What's going on?
Oh, we'll just leave Gav's tractor to run into it then.
Oh, you know what I'm saying there. If it's left as a building site for a while and it's just nothing's happening, because let's face it, there's a lot of places like that in the city, isn't there? And nothing's happening, and it's just derelict land. It doesn't look great, does it?
Right, we've gone off on one, but let's get back on track.
Get back on track.
Come on.
Yeah. Maybe I'll play the Tractor Boys tomorrow. Maybe there's something subliminal going on.
Gav, just leave it now. Come on, Ian, where are we going?
Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So we discussed his future on Wednesday in depth with me, Tony Scott and Conor O'Neill. Few differences of opinion. I'm sure, Joe was giving his opinion in an article the past day or so you can go on the Liverpool Echo website to read that. But obviously, Calvert-Lewin has rejoined first team training. And he could potentially be on the bench on Saturday. The big thing is, I guess, is that his representatives have been in contact with David Moyes about fresh talks over his future. So, I mean, what do you make of that from a standpoint of where's the ball and what court is it in?
Well, the big thing is his comments to the BBC this morning, where he said that he's open to staying. So I mean, that's as clear as it could be, I think. So I mean, that's the clearest indication. I mean, the fact that talks are going to happen has been something that they've been writing about for a couple of weeks already. There's been a sense at Everton that Dominic Calvert, obviously he was offered a new contract last year and nothing ever got signed. Yeah. There's been a sense that for probably a good few weeks now at Everton that Dominic Calvert and his people might be more willing to come to Everton than they perhaps come to Everton in terms of for talks and be open to what that might mean than perhaps they had done previously. And I think that looks like it's going to be the case. So, he's spoken to BBC and he said that, who wouldn't want to be part of the future that Everton have now got to offer. So he joins that growing list of players that, did a piece earlier on in the week, because some of them have told me in interviews I've done the likes of Lindstrom and Virginia, joining the likes of Idrissa Gueye and Alcaraz and Harrison, and saying that, we'd like to be part of this project moving forward if we can. Calvert-Lewin joins those ranks. I think we can see why Everton's a club with a bright future, an exciting future, and although there's going to be a challenging summer ahead, there's a lot of positivity. You can see why people would want to buy into that. So Calvert-Lewin being open to that is perhaps not a surprise. It's a fascinating one for the club to try and work out what to do with.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's a clear black and white answer to it because, if we were to get someone of more pure quality than Calvert-Lewin, you would say then the club would go in that route and let Calvert-Lewin go. I mean, Gav, what do you think? Is he keeping his options open? I know he's changed representation over the past couple of months. Have they heard whispers that, teams who he would consider to be better for him. I know, say the likes of Newcastle and Arsenal have been linked with him in the past. Do you think he's heard whispers that they're maybe not interested anymore?
I wouldn't say you need whispers. They're not interested, are they? I mean, I think they're coming here because I don't think they've got that many options. Because he's been injured since January, he scored 3 goals in 26 games, something like that, this season. In the times he did play, he's been I think he even said he's a bit off form. So I think Everton are back on the agenda for him and his representatives because his options elsewhere are probably non-existent. In terms of teams that he thinks he can do a job for and will financially reward them. So it's a bit of an about turn from last summer, isn't it? I mean, I think the difference between last summer is obviously, I sort of get why you perhaps wouldn't want to renew last summer because obviously I think it was well known that him and Dice didn't get on and you've got the uncertainty around the club. I sort of get that, but the failure of his representatives then was not to get him a move elsewhere. And I think he was, the fact that he's changed them indicates that actually he probably thinks that as well. So I think the ball is more in Everton's court than what it was last summer, and that should be reflected in discussions about what the deal is. And I think I'm a bit torn on this actually. I sort of get why the club would want him because if you get him in, it means we don't have to go out and buy somebody and incur a transfer fee and all that type of stuff. But at the same time, it's risky, isn't it? Because of his injury record, and he's now probably close to passing his peak years. And he gets to his end of his 20s, any injury problems are just magnified then, aren't they? So it could be a 3-year deal that's wasted because actually he spends most of it injured. So it's a tricky one for the club, but I can see why they'd want to go back to the negotiating table, but it should be at lower rates than what it was last summer. And then I think if you're Calvert-Lewin, he was basically, was fluttering his eyebrows at the club, today on the BBC. He wasn't saying that last year. And I think to me it just seems like a player who spent a year and with his agents looking at options, and now they're now non-existent. So his only option is got to Everton. That's the way I would read it. I mean, there may be options out there, but they may not be suitable for him. But if you retain Calvert-Lewin, you've got to go out and buy a striker, haven't you? You don't want him as your main striker.
The injuries come at a bad time for him, hasn't it? Certainly very unlucky. Certainly when the new managers come in, hope we played a different way. I mean, Joe, what do you, in terms of Calvert-Lewin, where do you actually stand? I know you've said you would retain him, wouldn't you, as services?
So I think that I'd be open to retaining him, but on one condition, and I think that is that both the club seek to retain him and that the player, if he wishes to stay, agrees that deal under with everybody well in the knowledge that he will have to fight for his place next season. I think that the injuries that he's had, and obviously he's been out for 3.5 months now, mean that Everton, and they have done this in the past, and they've paid a heavy price for it. They can't gamble on Dominic Calvert-Lewin being fit for 30 plus games a season. We hope he gets back to that. Of course we do. And I think that there were indications when in the early days of Moyes' return that he might be able to flourish under Moyes. Look, I mean, I don't hold it against him being uncertain over his future 12 months ago. I think there was a lot of uncertainty at the top of the club. We'd had numerous takeovers falling through. It was a difficult place for everyone to be in. And Sean Dyche and Calvert-Lewin has credited him for helping him get back to his fitness because he had 18 months of fitness. And I think Dyche played a really important role in that shouldn't be forgotten. The style of play that he did really didn't help Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Calvert-Lewin did labour for the first half of this season, but he laboured in a system and with a style of play in which all real attacking intent was sacrificed for defensive resilience, because that was all Dyche felt that he could do by the end of his tenure. So I don't hold it against him being uncertain last summer, but I think the reality is that neither Everton nor him can go into next season with the expectation that he can be the front man, the main man to lead the line. Everton have to go out and try and solve that problem in the summer transfer window. They have to find someone who can either be the number 9 and Calvert-Lewin can fight with him for his place, or someone that they're equals and they can fight against it for each other. We've done this in the past. We can't guarantee that we can rely on him, and we've been left short as a result of doing that. So there can't be any naivety in that. I do think that Moyes has got a really difficult. There's a lot of opportunity this summer. There's also a lot of risk because in having such a big turnover, obviously, what Moyes wants to raise the quality of this squad. But kind of doing a piece for this for the weekend. One thing that Moyes really doesn't want to do next season, and this is a thread that's running through all of his decisions right now, is he doesn't want to create a squad where it's almost like there are too many players with uncertainties over their fitness records. He doesn't want to create a new squad to take Everton into a bright new future, but then have his plans derailed after 3 months because 6 of them have got long-term injuries, and for you to be able to then go and say, well, you probably could have predicted this because this has kept happening in the past. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a player that falls into that category. There are a couple of others that he's got to make a big judgment call. And the frustrating thing for Everton is a lot of these players are players that are under contract beyond the summer. Nathan Patterson, obviously, does he want him or not? Yeah, but I mean, he spent the last 3 years, most of them injured. Vitaly Mikalenko's had 4 or 5 injuries that have kept him out of games over the last season. James Garner's had 2 big back injuries already in his short career. Tarkowski, like I was saying on the pod earlier on this week, is a massive blow for David Moyes. I wrote a piece on this and I had so many people saying it's not a blow. I don't know what you're talking about. You're over-egging this. But Moyes, this isn't an opinion. I'm telling you, Moyes wants to build his structure around that axis of Branthwaite, Tarkowski and Pickford. And now all of a sudden, Tarkowski's got surgery on a hamstring. It could ruin it's going to ruin his summer. It could take him out for pre-season. He will now go into next season, whatever happens, and we hope he comes back really strong. But he's a player whose game relies on his fitness and his durability and his strength and him always being available. Well, they're going to go into next season with question marks over whether or not he can carry on playing 36 games a season, 38 games a season because of that, and that's only natural. I mean, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is just the perfect example because Everton probably, and they might have the money to be able to do this to some extent, but it'll be very difficult for Everton to go into the transfer market and buy a striker with the Premier League pedigree and the talents and the track record when he's fit that Dominic Calvert-Lewin has. So retaining him on a deal offers a shortcut. You've effectively, you've got a £30 million player there that if you can get him fit and keep him fit is of that value to the club, and you don't have to go and pay that big expense for him. But obviously the danger is that you end up with another season where he ends up suffering from injuries. So I think that he's a player that I think Moyes and Everton should be willing to compromise on in terms of having him there even if there are fitness doubts because of the quality he does offer if he is fit. But it can only work if the player accepts that, look, I can't go into these negotiations as a player that's played, 80% of games the last 3 years and got double figures every season because he hasn't. There has to be a kind of a climb down in expectation from him as well. There has to be an acceptance that even if he signs a new deal, Everton might still carry on trying to get Liam Delap. We know it's going to be very, very difficult to get him. I mean, Man United's result against Athletic Club last night, it's a nightmare because obviously they move one step closer to potentially getting Champions League football next season, and then it becomes really difficult for Everton to compete with, say, them for someone like Liam Delap. Whereas if they don't get Champions League football next season, they don't have Europe next season, they're just another mess of a club that's just got a big wallet but nothing else going for them. Everton might be able to sell themselves against competition like that, but that might prove difficult. I think Calvert-Lewin won't be able to. If he wants to sign a new deal, he has to accept that Everton are going to have to look elsewhere and he's going to have to fight for his place. And I think it only works if both parties recognise that and any new contract recognises that as well.
I mean, Joel mentioned, Gav, at the start of that, a style of play for Calvert-Lewin to flourish in. We've gone from a manager who, under Dyche, played him in a way where he holds the ball up, he wins headers, and he was obviously stifled to an extent. Even his record before that wasn't good in scoring goals. We've now gone to a manager who has been a bit more pragmatic, and unfortunately Calvert-Lewin has been injured and not played. But we've played to Beto's strengths to an extent. I think that's clear to see. My question is, what is the style of play that we need to implement for Calvert-Lewin to flourish?
Can I just pick up on a couple of Joe's points? Yeah. You were saying, Joe, about if, Everton shouldn't get in a position where they're gambling on Calvert-Lewin being fit for the next 3 years. But if we give him a contract for 3 years. Aren't we gambling on that?
But depends on what terms. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
I get that. You know what I
if
mean?
you're, if you're giving him a reduced fee and you're telling him and you're then making efforts to bring in someone that can challenge him for a place, and you're not pinning all your hopes on him, and that's the danger. The danger is that you end up then what has to be avoided is you end up in a situation like after the Frank Lampard summer when Richarlison left, when Everton had one strike and then he brought Neil Maupay, which just didn't work at all. And it was, if Calvert-Lewin's fit, they've got a plan, and there is no plan B. Everton cannot go into next season like that, and Calvert-Lewin and his people have to accept that Everton can't afford to do that as well. And part of the balancing act there, if he wants to stay and if Everton want to keep him, has to be that they're still going to go into the market to try and find
I get that.
Find someone else. So they're not pinning everything on. So you have Calvert-Lewin on a deal whereby it's anything beyond, he's a squad player who's competing, pushing up standards, and you can have clauses in there that reward performances and goals and things like that. So if he gets to the standard that his people might think he can reach, he still gets rewarded for it, but Everton aren't giving that up.
Let me just jump in with a question, with a kind of comment from one of the audience here. So Terry Dactyl says, stop going on about the terms, which we know is important. Then he says, speak about the return that he brings. Obviously, he doesn't score enough goals. Can he score if he stays
This
fit?
goes back to your point.
Can he score enough goals if we play to his strengths?
I don't think Moyes strikers score a lot of goals. I mean, but just go back. I know I'm behind the back, but I think it's important. It's like, it doesn't matter what terms he's on. If he can't play, he can't play, can he? That's the thing. You should always. The old manager called Jimmy Cyril, and he used to say, like, buy players who play for you every week. That they're always going to be fit, and he's right there. And I can't help thinking that. I mean, I'm not averse with Calvert-Lewin coming back, but I think, like, if he's not fit, it doesn't matter what terms he's on. It's still a place in the squad that's gone and money that's going out, in players' wages that actually that we're losing, that we've effectively been warned about for 4 or 5 years, and have made a similar mistake possibly in the past in 2021. So that's what I'd say on that. And also with Moyes as well, is if he's on a 2-year deal, does he want players who are injured? Because that's just going to. If he wants to build something over 2 years, make that job is doubly difficult for him if he's got 5 or 6 players in the squad who are absent, injured. So you list them there, haven't you? Mikalenko, Garner, players like that. So this is where the length of Moyes' deal comes into it. So I sort of get the Calvert-Lewin lower terms, but if he's injured, it doesn't really matter, does it?
It does make a difference if you're paying him as a player that is going to be a squad player that you're not expecting to be available for every game.
Yeah, but it depends whether he accepts them terms, doesn't he?
That's what I'm saying. The compromise has to be both ways.
Yeah.
Like, it only works for Everton if Calvert-Lewin is willing to accept that he might not go into next season. Obviously, if he earns it and stays fit and scores goals, brilliant. But like, he has to accept that he's fighting to get to that position.
So he might be fluttering his eyelashes at us at the moment, but that might be at £100,000 a week, and not actually. Where if you look at his goals record, look at his games he's played, look at his age, because you might be putting him on a contract that takes him into his 30s. It's actually nowhere near £100,000 a week. You'd say lucky to get half, and. So the movable parts here are various on Calvert-Lewin, aren't they really? I'm sort of 50-50 on it. So that's that. But going back to his style of play, I mean, Moyes doesn't have a striker that scores so many goals a season. Just never had that, has he? And I don't think he particularly wants that, because he wants a striker to build your forward line around that will, like, run the channels, create space for your midfields and stuff. And so it'll be something like what, the style of play like we had in his last 3 or 4 years of his first spell, we had like Cahill and Fellaini playing up top, and you knocked it into them, but you had players
in and around,
or they like Antonio would run the channels, go out wide and leave spaces for for Lanzini and Ben Rahman and stuff like that. That worked really well at West Ham. So that's the way I would expect him to play, and because that's based on Moyes' track record, which will be, let's face it, not totally dissimilar to Dyche, but you would have a lot more players accompany on the front line, as where he was just too isolated in Dyche, wasn't he? And so that's what I would expect to see. But I don't think Moyes ever played the system where it's built around the strike and he'll score 20 goals a season. And I know it's all right saying that. And as Joe said, is trying to find them players is quite ridiculous, isn't it? Really?
That's the
ridiculously
issue, though,
hard.
He's never really been able to get that striker because he's never really had the money to get that striker. And I do find it a little bit interesting, Joe, that you say, if he stays fit, he's fighting for his place in the first team. I'll go as far as to say that if we don't sign anyone and we keep the 3 strikers that we've got who are at the club on a permanent basis, if they're all fit, Calvert-Lewin probably doesn't have to do much to fight for his team. I think he's in there over Beto and Chimiti straight away. The problem that we've got is injury record and fitness. The other problem is, okay, if you are going to let him go or you're not going to come to an agreement on his contract, we're clearly going to have to go and buy a striker. So you're going to have to either go and spend millions, which we may not have, on someone, or you're going to have to go and buy someone unproven in the championship or abroad on a lesser fee. So that's my point. Why it's a very difficult one to gauge and get your opinion across, because it's just not as black and white as just let him go.
No, it's not. But I think that he is the best striker in that squad. And
however, sorry, as a footballer, probably but as a goal scorer, is Beto.
Well, I mean, Beto hasn't scored since February.
No,
so it depends which Beto you get, and I think that the chances are that Everton end up with a style that's far more suited to Calvert-Lewin than it is to Beto next season.
No.
I mean, we talk about style there and approaches. Well, again, you can look at another one most recently with West Ham with Jared Bowen. Jared Bowen often leads that West Ham line, not with a view to scoring 25 goals a season, but because they'll link up play to the players around him. And that's something that Calvert-Lewin is, that's almost, I mean, his strength is obviously getting on the end of crosses that whipped into the box. And he has scored goals where he's had proper service, like under Ancelotti, when he's got the likes of Dean and Sigurdsson and James and that putting balls in for him. It's going to take Everton a while to be able to get to something like that. But when he is a good player, with his back to goal and bringing other players into it around him, the problem under Deitch was he was playing with his back to goal, winning flick-ons, running the chance to create space, but there was just no one around him because the other 10 players were 20 yards further down the pitch. Now, one of the things that Moyes wants to do next season is he wants goals from midfield, goals and assists from midfield. He wants a far more coherent attacking approach to the game. So he wants to have right wingers, left wingers, and attacking midfield that are there up and around him. So Calvert-Lewin might not be necessarily your best route to a striker scoring 15, 20 goals next season, but he might be he might be an effective route to 3 attacking midfielders all getting 8, and he pops in with another 8 himself, and that's where you've got Everton.
That's what it'll be.
Everton can only do so much. It's expectations for the summer are really difficult to try and manage because there is a lot of reason to be excited, but they can only make so much progress. They can only make so much progress in one window, bearing in mind the low basis upon which they're starting. And I kind of think that what you perhaps do with Calvert-Lewin is, if you can find an agreement that both sides of the deal are happy with, then maybe it takes the pressure off going and spending 30, 40 million pounds on a striker, because then maybe you can gamble a little bit more in a championship, or having a really, really looking at hitting the championship hard, looking for players at the minute, or a foreign player, because you can spread the risk a little bit. And if you've got an upcoming player from another league that might take a bit of time to settle, but could be the next big thing, well, there's less pressure on him if he's got Calvert-Lewin in around him. And similarly, there's less pressure on Calvert-Lewin to always be fit if he's actually got proper competition around him, which is something he hasn't really had for a couple of years. Because although Beto, which Beto are you going to get? You're going to get the Beto of February, you're going to get the Beto of April. You don't know, but he hasn't been a persistent rival for Calvert-Lewin over 18 months, has he? So it's a really interesting one. And
I think it's fair to mention that the teams that we did play in April have been position wise.
Okay, March maybe, because I'm talking about the 3 missed 1-on-1s against Brentford and things like that.
Agree.
So and then obviously the one against Liverpool as well. So
just to finish off on this point, Gav, I think for years now, and this dates back to even before Sean Dyche, so it's not a dig at him, but we've been completely dogged down by the fact that our striker, whoever it may be, has got to do a job for the team. He's got to do a job for the team. He's got to, whatever he does, it benefits the team.
Yeah.
Why can't we just go out there and, this is easily to say, go out there and find a striker, but obviously you've got Liam Delap, who everyone seemingly wants Everton interested in him. Why not just go out there and call a bluff? £30 million because his relegation clause suggests that that's what the offer should be. If he doesn't want to come, then at least you know.
Well, yeah, there's probably 7 or 8 clubs doing that, though, isn't there? Really?
But in turn, we obviously just need the goal scorer instead of a striker just doing the job for the team.
Clubs in our position need a goal scorer these days. I mean, the striking role has changed so much, hasn't it, over the last 30 or 40 years, where actually having a 20 30 goal season striker is not necessarily. Well, the stat show is actually that can work against you, because actually you play so much focused on getting that striker scoring goals that actually you don't make the best of elsewhere in the team. The modern centre forward is like that, works for the team. Lays the ball off. Is a figurehead, and you just play off that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 6'4" either. That they are coming back into fashion. So, the sign of pure goal scorer, I think, doesn't work in football anymore, does it really? And so, I wouldn't necessarily think that that's something we should be looking for. The final thing I'd say on the Calvert-Lewin thing, some of that might depend what happens to Beto. That if Beto gets sold in the summer, that means we're looking for a backup striker. Possibly, and that might mean that makes the Calvert-Lewin situation easier, I think, to look at giving them something. If they can't, exactly. If Besso's not sold and we're looking for a backup striker, who would you prefer for a year or whatever? Beto, or you know what you're going to get, or Calvert-Lewin, who actually you don't know what you're going to get because you don't know what his fitness is. RB is a superior player. It might just come down to that choice, mightn't it? Because the club might not be able to afford or want Calvert-Lewin and Beto if they go out and buy somebody else, might they?
I think that's a really good way of leaving this point on a teaser.
Who would you prefer? Well, exactly.
Well,
if fit, who to prefer. But going back to Joe's point about risks and stuff and assumptions over whether he's going to be fit or not, that is ultimately what you want, isn't it? For the backup striker.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Just conscious of time, a topic that we'll discuss. So Everton were mentioned in Parliament on Monday. Obviously, I assume you know about this, Joe.
Yeah, talk us through it, Ian.
So West Derby MP Ian Bryne has raised the idea of an Everton clause as part of reforms to the governance of English football. This was brought up on Monday, so I'll just read a quote from what he said in Parliament. So Ian Bryne said, PSR, profits and sustainability rules are perceived to many have unfairly targeted certain clubs, including the blue half of my city. Many Evertonians believe that the Premier League's handling of their case represents an abuse of process. They would like to see an amendment passed to this bill called the Everton Clause, giving new regulators a backstop power to require the Premier League to rerun a PSR process if there were concerns about its fairness. As a minimum, supporters of all clubs should have the ability to appeal to the regulator to ensure fair and due process in PSR cases to prevent any perception of unbalanced treatment. So that was just a segment of what he said in Parliament. There's loads of other things with regards to this Everton clause, but what did you make of it all? We've done a piece on it in the week as well.
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, you're never going to be able to remove perception of bias and unfairness. That's there's just always going to be that. No matter what happens, you look at Man City right now. Everyone who's in favour of Man City, you all say it's a fair process. Everyone who's not will say, whatever the outcome is, it's always going to end up causing arguments. Look, I think that's the important. Look, I don't think Everton were treated consistently. I think that's the issue for me. There's always going to be a lot of difficulty when you go through these processes for the first time, and Everton were the first time for these. So there are always going to be issues that need ironed out. There are always going to be grey areas that are left open to interpretation. There's always going to be people that disagree with them. My issue with the way in which Everton were treated was, as I say, there felt like a massive inconsistency between how different tribunals, how different panels on the commission viewed the mistakes Everton had made and how serious they were. and then obviously applied it to other clubs as well. For instance, like Forest, who ended up with a lesser points deduction than Everton's first one, despite a much bigger breach, and despite a breach which felt like they had a lot more warning over where things were going to go, and perhaps were more active in their decision to run the risks. And then obviously throw in Leicester as well, who've kind of managed to avoid it through technicalities over recent years. So really, like, I'm less interested in backstops to allow for appeals when there's a perception of unfairness, and more just in sensible rules being written that people can see are transparent, and you can then follow the process alongside the rule book, and everyone understands what they're going into and what the potential consequences are if and when that happens.
And Gav, you were really excited when I mentioned that this was going to be on the agenda.
Yeah.
Obviously, Joe mentioned obviously us, Forest, but we've also got the City case being heard or has been heard and waiting to get the decision on that. So what did you make of all what Ian Bryne said?
Do you want to tell you the first time Everton were mentioned in Parliament?
Go on.
I searched Hansard for this. I'll tell you why, because I remember when I did my first book of it's not on the John Moore trilogy, 1973.
Right.
You mentioned and mentioned us. Dennis Skinner, the Labour MP, the legendary beast of Bolsover, mentioned us. It was to do with we just. I'm going off on the tangent, but it's quite interesting when we do get mentioned in Parliament, because it doesn't happen very often. Is when we effectively sacked Harry Katz, we want to get Don Revie at Leeds in. And we want to put him on more money, more Harry was on. And at a time of rampant inflation and massive pay awards, the government had put in a pay freeze. And one of the rules was, if you replace somebody with somebody else, you couldn't put them on more money. And so Skinner brought it up.
Imagine that today.
Yeah. Skinner brought it up in Parliament about Everton breaching the government's pay rules. And guess what? Don Revie never took the job, because I think, he felt...
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah. He felt that actually I might agree to come to Everton and find out my salary's being reduced because of the government's intervention. So no, just an aside. It's quite interesting, really. It's these words, you can say it, but how does it mean in practicality? There's a couple of things there. There's no regulator that I can appeal to, because the government white paper is quite clear about what the regulator can do within football. And the one thing it can't do is intervene in the PSR process. It's not there as an appeal. Somebody you appeal to. It's there actually to help the PSR process. So I don't think you can appeal to anybody about that. So I don't think that's going to work if somebody feels they're being hard done by. How you can adjust things, I'm not sure as well. Going back to Joe's point, which I think we don't go on about this, but as it's being panned out, the PSR thing, and I think we said this after the first hearing, we said that we accept our judgment, as it were, as long as we see everybody else as being treated the same way thereafter. And I think there's an argument to say that actually that's not being the case. Yeah. Where I feel, and I'm trying to be fair on these things, legitimately that I think that Everton and to a lesser degree Forest were made an example of. I think that appears to be quite clear. And other clubs have escaped is probably the wrong word, but escaped any sort of action through whatever means. And a lot of them, they'll argue it's legitimate, but it doesn't seem to be within the spirit of the law. But you just get that feeling. As you say, Joe, it's all about feelings of bias, isn't it? And you can't help thinking that we were pursued over in PSR terms as a relatively minor matter. If you think some of the other stuff that's gone on since then, where clubs have had no action taken against them, where the Premier League can quite blithely say, everybody's met PSR in a month. We're not going to show you the numbers, but I think in January they said that over 3 year period, they've met PSR, and that's it. There doesn't appear to be the same scrutiny placed elsewhere in what was done in Everton.
Won't we, with City coming up now?
Yeah, well, that's a different issue, isn't it? City. At the same time, we do look on like bias. The big clubs will say that actually Everton were actually dealt a favour by the Premier League because we breached in 2021, and the Premier League didn't take any action other than have an agreement with us. The Premier League has dropped the incest issue, which could have been damaging to us.
So that's through
the last.
incompetence in a way.
Well, it's all deals within deals, isn't it, really? I mean, I think I've said before that my feeling is that actually Everton changing its voting against the Premier League for the Premier League about the associated parties transactions, but actually you can see there's probably in a conversation there. You support us, and we might just quietly drop. That could be. That's just my opinion. So what we're seeing, deals can be made between clubs and the Premier League to mutual benefit. So I think that's always interesting as well. Somebody said, I was reading Miguel Delaney's book on sport washing, and there was a Premier League, a chief executive of a Premier League club said that most clubs are quite happy for others to breach PSR as long as they don't take the mickey. So they all know that there's all stuff going on to fiddle the numbers, so you stay within PSR, but don't take the mickey in doing that, And I think so. What we've learned since Everton is that it's a lot more of a greyer area rather than you're either above 105 million or below. There's a lot more stuff going on around that, which means it actually breach or not. And so on that basis, I just don't think that can work. What Ian's saying there, to be fair, because
it still surely comes down to the Premier League regulating itself though as well, and like the way they've gone through the process with Everton and Forest has been a bit of a shambles.
They followed the process that everybody's had signed up to. I mean, you can quibble over a few things, but I wouldn't say we'd be harshly dealt with based on what was in the commissions at the time. I'd argue that we've probably been harshly dealt with in terms of what's happened with other clubs since and the way the Premier League's operated the PSR regime since. But in terms of looking at the commissions and the facts that was placed before them, I don't think we were particularly harshly done by. But what I think we've suffered from is that it was just the Premier League putting a stake in the ground, wasn't it? And other clubs now have been able to circumvent it, haven't they? Through lots of stuff that they signed up to, including us, about selling stadia and things like that, and women's teams.
Fantastic comment here from Terry Dactyl, just in reference to who mentioned Everton first in Parliament. It's obviously tongue in cheek. So he says, Churchill first mentioned Everton. He said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." Okay. Let's quickly jump into team selection and predictions.
I'm going to have to go. Are you going to go? I'll give you my prediction. I'm going to say 3-0 to Everton.
3-0 to Everton.
And I'll see you later because I'm off the Finch farm,
right? To shoot off right now. We'll finish off now, Gav. But yeah, team selection then.
Do you want me to talk about all the mentions in Parliament? You don't, do you? No.
Probably not.
No. I think we need to win these last two home games, do you? Because I think if we win these, you'd say that the General Moyes return has worked well for the club in terms of results and just general the feeling of well-being. So I think if we get the results in the last two home games, 6 points, I think that will be fine. If we don't, and we don't get anything from Fulham and Newcastle, we're sort of looking at a run of 12, 13, 14 games with maybe 1 or 2 wins.
So would you say a minimum 6 points, even if we lost, obviously, to Fulham?
Yeah, I'd say as long as we got 6 points in the last two home games, really the Fulham and Newcastle games are free hits. Yeah. So I think it's essentially we win tomorrow. I'd say 2-0, and it would be good to the lineup might be interesting, mightn't it? Bear in mind some of his comments last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could argue more so that tomorrow's game or results is maybe more important than the Southampton one. Don't get me wrong, you want to win against Southampton, you want Goodison's last game to be a victory, but after the back-to-back defeats, you want to go into this game and coming out of that game with a win.
Yeah,
to get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't really matter the Southampton results. Yes, for
there might be some cash involved, mightn't it?
Yeah, obviously terms of position. I want to win both.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is tomorrow has to be a win just to keep, like you've said there.
We've one win in 10 or 11, is it something in the Premier League? I can't remember.
But we have again. I'll go back to we played the top 5 in the last month.
But it's still whatever. When you look at a sequence of results, you just mentioned that the highlights only in the highlights is it 1 win in 10 or something like that.
I'm just happy that we
got to win.
We've been fairly competitive in the last 5 games. Obviously, Forest was a fantastic result. Decent draw against Arsenal. It was always going to be tough against Liverpool.
City as well. We were possibly unlucky there a little bit. Yeah.
I didn't go the game, but City have just done exactly what they usually do towards the end of the season. They just win every game. That's what City do. But even though they still had the poor season.
Guardiola sets up the fitness of the team to do that, doesn't he?
And Chelsea was you'd probably say Chelsea was probably the worst results and
first
performance.
half at Chelsea. We were woeful. I think Moyes was obviously very angry after the game, wasn't he? Really. So you would hope he get a little bit of we get it back tomorrow on a result that I think Moyes has probably laid into the team in the nicest possible way during the week, and they come back fit and firing.
Be interesting to see if Beto starts his reaction.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of players, isn't there? Patterson, Beto. Chimisi's an interesting one at the moment as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't think Calvert-Lewin's going to be fit enough to start. Suggesting he might be on the bench. Still wouldn't be surprised if it's Breuer or Beto over Chimiti, to be honest. Yeah. Which would be a shame, because you obviously want to see what Chimiti's about and what he can do, because there's still huge amounts of question marks on his capabilities.
I don't think so. I think he looks eminently capable. He's not had enough opportunities to show it. I don't think he didn't do himself any favours on Saturday, did he? I'm just wondering whether his lack of usage indicates that Moyes wants his put him out on loan next year.
Yeah, you're only going to do that
if being in the squad.
If you at least get another 2/3 strikers in. Yeah. What I want to see, I don't mind Patterson getting another go. I think that
I think that, to be fair to the lads, yeah, absolutely.
I would like to see Alcaraz played as the number 10. I just think someone suggested this Decore experiment needs to stop. I don't think it's an experiment.
It's been going for donkeys,
that's what I mean.
Hasn't it? Yeah,
that's been going. So I think it's time for the change. The problem is, if he plays number 10, you've got Ndiaye fitting on the left. Who plays in the right? Because McNeil's probably not going to be fit, and you're not going to play Decore on the right. So I wouldn't be surprised if Decore stays in as the number 10 and Alcaraz goes over to the right.
He's played left, hasn't he? Alcaraz and stuff. I mean,
I just don't think he works on the wing, to be honest.
Not talking Jack Harrison there, right?
Again, I think we've just seen enough of him to suggest that he's not good enough, and he hopefully...
The word is during the week on social media that Moyes is a bit of a fan.
I wouldn't mind. Moyes will never do this in a million years, but putting Garner over there on the right. But we've had this huge debate of what's Garner's best position and what his role is. We still need to find that out. That's another podcast in itself.
Right back in it, from what I've seen.
Conor O'Neill believes that James Garner's best position is fullback on the right hand side, which few would argue with. But again, I've said this on many occasions, he is better as a utility player who could fit in. Or right now, he seems to be better as a utility player who could fit in when needed. Because he'll play right back at one game and he'll do well. He could do well as a right mid if he plays 70, 80 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, interesting. But I think it's a bit more of an important game than what it feels like on paper, isn't it? In terms of our run of results. But it was also going back to the start of the pod. It could be quite an emotional game as well for a lot of people. There's the last 3 p.m. kickoff of a Saturday, and there might be a lot of people there who not go in the final game as well for whatever reason. So it could be a great occasion. Well, hopefully it will be.
Prediction then?
I said 2-0 today.
2-0, yeah, sorry. I said 3-1 on Wednesday, and I'm not going to defer away from that. I guess just to finish off, we'll come full circle almost.
Oh, what we're going back to now?
No,
just back to DCL.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, do you think he will, if he's offered lesser terms, he would accept that? Or do you think he would just be like...
the terms he's been offered elsewhere, isn't it?
But obviously the club have offered him terms and he's turned it down. Do you think the club will go back with lesser terms now?
Well, I would expect them to.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, too right, yeah. Absolutely. You didn't want to sign it last year. You come back. I actually, going back to what I said, I suspect there's options... His viable options elsewhere are very limited, so that's why he's coming back to Everton and saying all this stuff about being at the new ground and so on. Well, I don't think he was saying that 12 months ago.
Eric Leslie says Dominic Calvert-Lewin wouldn't have scored any of the goals Beto scored this season to propel us away from relegation.
Different finishes, yeah. I'd argue that, but I think Calvert-Lewin's a bit better on hold.
Do we want a striker just to hold the ball up, though, to do a job for the team?
A lot of clubs, some modern strikers are like that, aren't they?
Eric continues, Beto as first choice would get 10 to 12 a season, better than Calvert-Lewin. Which, I mean, goal to games ratio.
I think his best season in Italy was 10, wasn't it? I mean, you can throw numbers out there and nobody can argue against it, but I don't think there's anything in the track record that suggests Beto can score 10 or 12 goals in the Premier League season, is there really?
Okay, we'll finish off. Any final thoughts? You are going tomorrow.
I'll be there tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. In the very squashed press seats.
No padded seats.
Box, absolutely not. Yeah. It should be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that is all for today's show. Please remember to give us a like and subscribe to the channel and drop us some 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Hopefully we'll enjoy our Saturday evening with an Everton win.
That Saturday night feeling, as Moyes used to say.
You just want it, don't you? You want to be able to, celebrate an Everton win in the pub with a pint afterwards, knowing that countdown to the final game.
And we've not done that at Goodison since February.
3 p.m. Oh, you're talking about a win?
Yeah.
Wow, is it that long ago?
So, yeah. We played less than Tottenham. Was it the Leicester game? Was it the second win? Was it under Moyes? Or the first? Can't remember. But yeah, so we want that Saturday night feeling, as our manager likes to talk about.
Okay, well, I've been Ian Croll, joined by Gav Buckland, and Joe Thomas was here. He's gone now. And this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.